It wouldn't be the summit if we didn't have to call an audible and tighten the program a little bit. I tantalized you this morning with the idea of a big shootout between Kevin Miller, John Andrews, and Teresa Meloragno over the provocative question, are conservatives their own worst enemy? We're going to defer the full-dress discussion of that question to an upcoming Issue Monday event over at CCU, one of our regular monthly forums that Centennial Institute sponsors. We wanted to be sure that those who have traveled from across the country to be speakers at the conference have their full opportunity today and tomorrow, and I just don't see how we can fit in a full-dress discussion of this provocative question. But I wanted you to know Kevin Miller and Teresa Meloragno. You already know John Andrews far too well, I believe. But the three of us are trying to put the think in think tank at Centennial Institute with books that we've each written recently. And wouldn't you know it, you're in luck because all three books are on sale out in the exhibit area here at the summit. I want to start with Teresa Meloragno. Teresa has until recently been part of corporate relations and business outreach for the graduate and adult division at Colorado Christian University, where she talked with local businesses about their needs for mid-career continuing education for their employees. She's a much in-demand public speaker across the country, talking not only about issues of character, integrity, and the moral foundations of a free society, but about her own hard-won lessons of having beaten cancer. Teresa's book is called The Integrity Meltdown. Teresa, if you were on Backbone Radio with me, and indeed you've been on Backbone Radio with me, and I asked you to take a couple of minutes and tell people what does the Integrity Meltdown have to tell us about fulfilling America's promise, the theme of this weekend summit. Tell us about it.
Thank you so much. I believe that there's a decline in our society that it's really weakened our foundational principles, our moral values, and it transcends government and politics. We see an integrity meltdown in business, in the communities that we live in our education system, in our marriages, and in our families. You see, America used to be a society of great freedoms, but our freedoms are slowly being reduced because the elitist value system is alive and well in Washington. Anyone agree?
Yeah.
Okay. We've also used to enjoy world-leading prosperity, but our economy has been shaken because of business decisions made from leaders who operate out of greed. Anyone agree with that? Well, you see, when you have a meltdown of integrity in a society, you're going to see backdoor deals, power plays, secret grabs, high-profile infidelity, and you're going to see people who have an addiction to government handouts. Now, I don't want to take up much of your time, but I do want to share one thing. We've been talking a lot about democracy and liberty here today, and I don't want you to leave without understanding what those really are. Democracy is two wolves and a lamb voting on what's for lunch. Liberty is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote. So I thank you so much for your time today. Would love to talk to you at the table. My book really outlines a little bit more about how we restore our foundational principles. How do we restore our moral values in this country? And it would be a privilege for me to meet you and talk with you about that. Thank you so much.
Stay with us. Teresa Meloragno, Integrity Meltdown. Thank you. Now, every first Friday of every month, about a half a mile from my house in Centennial, at an unprepossessing office building, at 7 in the morning, you just see waves of intellectual energy and heat of ideas under scrutiny radiating out of this conference room. It's called Vanguard Forum. Anybody ever been to Vanguard? A lot of you have. Applaud if you've ever been to Vanguard. All of you that are from Denver, or even if you're further away in Colorado, you need to know about something called Vanguard Forum. It is the brainchild of Kevin Miller. He's the founding dean of the business school at Colorado Christian University. He's been a business turnaround consultant, a software entrepreneur. We're just delighted that he is rejoining the CCU Business School faculty as of this coming academic year that begins in 3 weeks. And out of the Vanguard Forum was born first an issue of Centennial Review about how we prioritize between freedom and virtue in governing ourselves as Americans. And out of the seed of that came a book called Freedom Nationally, Virtue Locally, Pause, or Socialism. This is a great book for starting arguments, and I look forward to having all of you with us when we can really take on the argument as to whether conservatives have gotten exactly the opposite of what we thought we were getting from our effort of the last 30 or 40 years. Kevin Miller has got a pretty persuasive case. I'm not fully persuaded, a pretty persuasive case that is exactly what has happened. A lot of us, when we saw the contrast last evening between two statesmen, two dedicated patriots, two men who couldn't possibly love America more, but a Rick Santorum, federal, Washington-centered approach to certain issues, a Rick Perry, decentralized, state-based, 10th Amendment, more localized approach to certain issues, a lot of us are thinking, wow, there's the Kevin Miller book in a nutshell. Kevin, tell us about Freedom Nationally, Virtue Locally.
Thanks, John. It's been a great conference. Appreciate the welcome here. I'll just ask you a couple questions, or I'll make a couple of statements. The first is, conservatism is failing at the national level and will continue to do so. That's because their strategy is fatally flawed. We as conservatives are asking the federal government to deliver both freedom and virtue. And in that process, we get neither, because as they build up all the laws they do and build all the bureaucracy that they do, they misdefine virtue and they make us comply with laws that take away our freedom. Conservatives have to move to freedom nationally, virtue locally. Remember the phrase from the Bible? Render to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's. We are not to render our virtues to Caesar. That's the brilliance of the Constitution. The framers gave us the First, Ninth, and 10th Amendments, which reserved virtue to us as individuals, our families, our communities, and even the states, but not to the federal government. And yet many conservatives are rendering virtues to the federal government, and the federal government is a theocracy. And not a Christian one, but a secular theocracy. And they've stolen a bunch of Christian ideas like original sin. You know, like carbon footprints. Y'all are sinners. You knew this, right? Right. And that the federal government is the virtue Caesar, where they define and enforce virtues. As long as conservatives play the game unwisely, as they have for a couple of decades, that if they just get the right people in office and get the right laws in place, we'll be a virtuous country again. No. The framers knew better. Virtue is a bottoms-up concept. As Dennis Prager said, the state will never bring us virtue, and they'll crush traditional virtue on their way to compliance to federal law. We must recapture what rendering really means, both biblically and as citizens in America. This book will challenge you to think differently about conservatism and to change our ways, not because our principles are wrong, but because our strategy is fatally flawed. Thank you.
Kevin, stay up here. Kevin, one on each side, please.
And excuse me, by the way, some guys will do anything to avoid a debate that they might lose.
Oh, you found me out. Freedom will undermine itself. Sad but true. Success will undermine itself. Think of what we heard from Dennis Prager. Think of the funny but piercingly true message we've just heard from Kevin Jackson about unintended consequences and about the way that a free society, absent personal responsibility, winds down towards zero, just the way we learned in physics and chemistry. Any system will wind down towards entropy, towards zero cold, unless the energy is sustained and renewed. Personal responsibility is the price of freedom. Personal responsibility is the only way that we keep success from poisoning us and suffocating us. That's my thesis in the third book we draw to your attention, called Responsibility Reborn, A Citizen's Guide to the Next American Century. One of our questions, you see it on the back of your program book today, will America celebrate another centennial? Will we make it to 2076? Most great nations fall off, and usually because of fiscal suicide, somewhere around 250 years. Wow, is that chilling? Take it in the context of what we heard from Arthur Brooks earlier. Responsibility Reborn, Freedom Nationally, Virtue Locally, Integrity Meltdown, shameless commercial for all three books. I just add one thing. What Kevin Jackson said about the model of a conservative woman or the model of a conservative man. Some of you saw where Westward magazine ranked the Western Conservative Summit speakers as sexiest. Teresa and Kevin totally beat Andrews. I'm down at number 12. I felt good about being ahead of Armstrong. He was at 19. We both wanted to be in the bottom 10 because we've got a stodgy reputation to uphold. Thank you all. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Teresa.